Hey everybody, welcome back to the next part in my Creating a Quick Great Tone series, and today I'm going to answer a question that I receive a lot. What is the best way to create the perfect solo lead boost? We've all been there, we're playing live, we have a beautiful mix going on stage, our rhythm guitar is sitting beautifully. When it comes to our solo, we're kind of buried in the mix, it's not sitting where it should, and we want a little bit more oomph on our solos just to peak above the mix. So what's the best way to just give us that little bit of extra volume? It might seem like a simple task, but if done incorrectly, it is not going to give the desired results. So today we're going to fix that problem. Let's dive right in, head over to HX Edit and get this sorted out. So here we are in HX Edit, and I have a little preset that I have that basically around the template I always use. It'll allow a studio comp at the end, parametric EQ, low and high shelf. Parametric EQ is just being used for low and high cuts. In this one, I have a vintage digital delay, a room reverb, and I have a little placator dirty going into a 412 greenback 25. And basically the preset sounds like this. So nice little crunch tone. Let's say it's our lead tone and everything is working quite nicely, but we just want to have that ability to be able to boost it. So we need to answer basically three questions here. We need to know where is the best place to add the boost? How do we add the boost? And by how much do we boost? So let's dive into that one at a time. So the first question is, where do we add the boost? And I think that this has the potential to be the most problematic situation. Here's why. Let's do something simple right now. Let's say somebody came along and said, I have my preset here, everything's sounding fine, but I need to boost that for my solos. Well, one way we can do that is by simply, adding a gain block. I come in here, I put a gain block before the amp. Wherever we decide to boost the volume from, we can simply assign that parameter to a foot switch. And I'm going to bring it down to foot switch number 7. Then I'm going to head over to bypass controller assign. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to tell it that basically on the minimum gain, I want it to stay at 0. But on the maximum, let's go with like +4 for now. So what I've done is basically now when I step on this foot switch 7, I switch between gain of 0 and +4. Now you might think, perfect, I've got a nice lead boost. Well, let's see what it actually does sound-wise. So here it is on the 0 setting. Let's go to the +4, and then I'll switch without talking. What did you notice? There really wasn't much of a volume boost at all, so that's really not going to accomplish what we want. But the question is, why? Whenever we boost going into a tube amp or a model of a tube amp, especially on a distorted setting, really the effect that we're going to get by boosting the volume before it is just driving that amp into overdrive more. It's not really going to give us what we want. We're going to get a little more distortion, which is fine if that's what you're looking for, but it's not going to give us that volume boost. And a really good way to illustrate this is by simply doing this, playing this so that it's boosting before the amp, then dragging this after the amp and hearing the difference. So let's take a listen to that. Hear the difference? Now we actually do have a boost and the volume jumps, and we're not hitting the front end of the amp harder, so we're not getting more distortion or more overdrive out of the amp, but we are getting a volume boost. But it goes a little further than that. We also have to look down chain from where we're doing our boost. We have a linear block here, a low and high shelf. We have a vintage digital, which the danger of this delay is that depending on how much signal we boost into it, we could be adding some digital distortion artifacts in just by design. That's the way that block works. So that's a non-linear block, meaning the amount of input level it receives is going to affect its behavior and give us different outcomes versus if we had less signal going into it. The reverb is not going to be a problem. It's linear. The EQ is linear. The compressor at the end, though, is non-linear. Again, the more signal we put into that, the more compression we're going to get. So even this here, while it's better than having it before the amp as far as just getting that volume boost, what's happening is when we boost to the plus 4 dB position, we're now going to get a little bit more compression. Again, that's not necessarily terrible if we understand that's what we're getting and we're okay with it and it's giving us the desired results. But we need to be aware of it. So you might say, well, what can we do to avoid that? Well, how about we just take our little boost we created and we move it after the compressor. Now let's hear the results of that. There we are getting the purest, simple volume jump without directly affecting our tone in any way. We're not adding more distortion. We're not adding more compression. We're not potentially adding some digital distortion artifacts to our vintage digital delay and so on and so forth. So you can see that this is really going to be dependent on what we have in our signal chain. If there was no vintage digital and there was no compressor and it was just a bunch of linear blocks, we could really get away with putting that volume boost just about anywhere, except before the amp, because as we've talked about, that amp is also nonlinear and it's just going to drive it more into distortion. Now, that's another technique you can use if you want to add a little bit more push to the front of an amp. You could add some sort of a gain block before and push the amp harder, but that's not what this discussion is about. So now that we understand where to do our solo boost, and I'm not telling you exactly where you have to, that's going to be up to us depending on the results that you want, but we at least have an understanding of, depending on where we place the volume boost, we now know what the results that we're going to get from it. Now, if we've decided we're going to do it over here, do we really need this gain block? Could I not just come over to the output block and simply right click that, assign that to foot switch 7, and then do the same sort of thing here? I can have a minimum setting of 0 and a maximum setting of 4. Now when I hit that same foot switch, my output block is going to do the same thing for me without wasting another block. So that would be a very simple way to do it. We could also simply assign this setting to snapshots, where we maybe name our first snapshot rhythm, and then we move to our second snapshot, name it lead, enable the output block for snapshots, and then on lead have it set to +4 so that when we switch now between rhythm and lead, we get the same effect. That way there we could also have something like the delay kick in when we switch to the next snapshot. So that's another possibility. Yet another possibility would be to assign whatever parameter we want to control our volume boost or our lead boost to an expression pedal and do the same sort of an idea. I've assigned an expression pedal to, we'll have the minimum at 0, we'll have the maximum at 4 again. I'm just using that number as an example. Now when I come over to my expression pedal, I can control the amount of boost more as a dimmer switch with a minimum and a maximum set up, which would work kind of like this. I really like that method because it doesn't tie us into two settings on the parameter. We can kind of have a little bit more flexibility. Maybe we set the +4 as too loud. Well, now we can just set it at +3. Or just use our ears and go by feel as to what works in a particular situation. Maybe the band is really cooking a little bit louder on a particular song, and we decide that, you know, my normal is +4, but I'm going to set this to +6 actually. and I'm just going to give myself a little more leeway here, but maybe I'll never actually go above +4. But it's actually there if I need it. Another interesting thing to show, to kind of go back to a previous point of putting the boost before the amp. And the reason I'm going to bring this up again is because it's a really big question I get where folks will do this type of thing where they'll add, some sort of boost before the amp. And just listen to, even when I boost this to its maximum of +12, it just saturates that amp more, but we really get very little in the way of volume jump. So, a lot of folks look and go, I've added 12 dB of gain. This should really be giving me a lot more volume. But because we're hitting the front of the amp, which is a nonlinear block, we're just saturating that amp more. And then potentially, if we did it before the compressor, we're just adding way more compression, right? All right, so that brings up the next question, which is how much should we boost by? That is not a question I can answer. I've seen a lot of folks say, I give myself, +3 dB. I really like that. That works well for me. Some people say +2, some people say +5. Using the expression pedal like I showed is a good way to get around that, simply because, as I mentioned, we then have much more control. We can maybe overshoot a little bit, maybe put +6 or 7, which we may know we'll never need, but we'll never have to access it. Versus on a foot switch, if we put +7 as the max, 0 is the minimum, we have those two choices, right? So with the expression pedal, it's a very good way to go about accomplishing this. I personally don't really use volume boosts a lot when I'm playing live. I do usually have an expression pedal assigned on my output block, and I just kind of ride that because I know it's not going to affect my tone. So maybe I'll turn my volume up a little bit louder than I know I need it, and then just have that expression pedal pulled back by a few dB, and it gives me that room. If the band really starts playing and much louder and cooking, right, I can kind of still give that a little bit more juice and get above that. So there isn't really necessarily one answer as to how much you should boost. But I would say that, +3 or +4 dB is probably a good starting point. Work from there and then adjust to your taste. What'd you guys think of that? I hope that was helpful. Not so much about how much we should boost, but more about where and how we should boost. And I think if we follow the tips that I laid out today, I think it's going to give you a really quick, easy way to add a really successful solo boost that's going to give you what your particular needs are asking for. So I really hope that was helpful. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to my channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.